How's it going, everyone, and welcome all in for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We're only days away from the start of the college basketball season, and this episode, I'm going to strictly focus on my picks. This is going to be for the standings, where everyone's going to finish, but also I'm going to go into the awards as well, and I'll make some preseason picks for those, and definitely bookmark and everything else just to see how accurate I am going to end up being. Obviously, there's going to be some misses here and there, but gonna take my crack at the WCC standings and picks, as well as I'll go through all of the WCC awards as they are going to get rolled out in March. So, before we get any further, remember to subscribe on the YouTube channel and also on your favorite streaming service. Follow along on social media at Post by Zach and unofficial WCC Pod. All right, so let's start with the standings. I think this is the thing that most everyone's obviously checking off their list. So let's just dive into it. I'm going to start at the bottom. We know that, so this season is a transition year for the WCC. You add Washington State, you add Oregon State. Gonzaga looks like they're going to be in the national title picture again. A lot of interesting stories coming out of this season. So that is going to have some level of impact on the standings as I've kind of started to put these together. And obviously, I think there's going to be some variance of where these teams could end up being, but I'll talk about that as we go along. But let's get into it. And I'm going to start with number 11, and I think this is pretty obvious on this front, and that's going to be Pepperdine. Pepperdine, I think, is very clearly going to be the number 11 team in the league. You have first-year head coach Ed Schilling taking over for Lorenzo Romar. You have a lot of, basically a clean slate at Pepperdine, and it hadn't looked good over the last few years. It hadn't looked good, and this is a team that really needed to turn it around. 14 newcomers. I do like some of those pieces. Mo Odom coming over, I like that. I like the addition of Aaron Clark. I think there's some nice pieces here, but I can't see them really kind of moving too far away from where they were a year ago, which was one from the bottom. So that's kind of like where I'm going to have them slotted in at this point. Number 10, also a team with a lot of changes, a lot of shifting, is San Diego. San Diego also comes in having lost quite a few guys. I mean, talked about it during their preview, losing Kevin Patton Jr., losing Deuce Turner, losing Wayne McKinney, losing Jimmy Oladipo, losing PJ Hayes. They lost a really solid group of guys that helped this team finish 5th a year ago. And without that group, without really kind of like a solid sense of who this team is, it's hard to really say what this team is going to be. Now, again, like they also have some interesting pieces, KJ Bradley being one of them. Cody Koulé is also another one of those guys who's coming in, who's going to really help out. The return of Steven Jamerson is obviously a positive for the San Diego squad. The return of David Simon from injury is also another big one for this team. But there's also a lot of growth that this team needs to have, and I think the depth of the teams, of everyone above them, and how much everyone else has improved is part of the story for San Diego. So right now, I'm slotting them in at 10th. Number 9 is the Pacific Tigers. Obviously, this is a team that was 6-26 a year ago, 0-16 in WCC play. They had to start from scratch. They also have new head coach, new roster. Everything is new at Pacific. And talking with head coach Dave Smart, I am pretty confident that he's going to definitely turn this around into a much more competitive team. You look at some of the pieces that they were able to bring in, the Lamar Washingtons, the Jefferson Koulibaly, Elias Ralph, bringing in someone like a Jazz Gardner, Elijah Fisher. There's a lot of talent that has been brought into this team, and I think that's why it has me pretty optimistic that they could be maybe that surprise team as we kind of go through WCC play. I'm not necessarily, obviously not as surprised as San Diego ended up being 5th a year ago, But Pacific, I think, is going to be much more competitive. I think they're going to be crawl out of that cellar, and they're going to be a problem for some teams. I mean, this is a team that I think could potentially climb up into, if everything goes right, hell, I don't know if they end up seventh or whatnot. I don't think so, but they're definitely not going to be last. I think this Pacific team has improved, and I mean, honestly, I mean, they had nowhere else to go but up. And I do think that this Tiger team has been pointed in the right direction, so I have them at 9. Number 8, Portland. The Portland Pilots, this is a squad, fourth season under head coach Shante Leggins, that also has had its struggles over the last couple of years. They were the second lowest scoring team in the WCC. They also allowed the second most, fourth, but they also were a team that struggled on the rebounding front, 8th in offensive rebounds. So this is a squad that also needed an influx of talent. And even though they do return 40% of the minutes from a year ago, some key guys coming in are going to be really helpful. Max McKinnon being one of those. The freshman Austin Rapp coming from Australia is another big piece for this team. Todd Jones, another freshman, athletic guy, is going to, I think, help this Portland squad. And they need to get tougher defensively. They need to get better on the glass. These are two areas of focus that this Portland team is going to have going into the year. I don't think that they're going to move that far off of this 8th spot, but they do need to at least be looking like they're pointing in the right direction, be more competitive on a regular basis. Because, again, this is a team that won all of 12 games a year ago. They have to be better than that this season if they're going to really kind of like move this forward with the new conference situation that we have over the next year or so. Keep in mind that also the Grand Canyon and Seattle Ofsy are coming. Well, Grand Canyon maybe, but you still have a couple more teams coming in a year from now that's going to make this league even that much more competitive. You got to point this in the right direction, but Portland, I think, is solid at that 8th spot. This is where it gets interesting. 1 through 7, I think you can make a case for a lot of different things from here on out. And I'm starting at 7. I do think that this is a squad that, one, does have a lot to prove, a lot to kind of get back on track. They have almost a brand new roster. This is a team that I think has a head coach that is in prove it mode going into this season. And honestly, that sounds like it could be a couple different teams. But right now, I've got to slot that 7 spot for Oregon State. And again, this is a team that has not been good over the last couple of years. They won 13 games a year ago, 11 the year before that, 3 the year before that. And they have to get pointed in the right direction. They have some talent on this squad. Michael Ratai coming back, he's a big piece of that. Josiah Lake, another key returner, but a ton of newcomers that are going to have to play factors for this squad. Isaiah Tsai, good-looking shooter, athletic. DeMarco Minor is another guy coming over from SIUE, all Missouri Valley first team. They also have over Parsafala from Southern Utah. So there's a lot of talent that's come into the squad, but it needs to gel. And this is a team that, even with the players that they brought in, its efficiency, I think, is going to be key. Their defense, their grittiness is going to, I think, keep them in a lot of games. And but that's also kind of like the ceiling of like their efficiency, I think, is going to cap them out at a certain point. And now, if everything goes right for this Oregon State team, maybe they could actually crack into the top 5. But right now, this Oregon State team, the Beavers have so much left to prove, so much left to show on the court, because this squad is still a work in progress, a lot of new pieces, and that continuity is going to matter the deeper and deeper you get into the season. And Oregon State right now has a lot of similarities to the next team I have on my list, at least when you're talking about the story of who they are. This Oregon State team, I'm sliding them at 7. At 6, it's LMU. Very similar in the way of, this is a team that has to prove it. This is a team that also struggled a year ago. This is a team that struggled 2 of the last 3 years. They won 12 games last year, 5-11 in the WCC. Stan Johnson, in his 5th season, they returned 38% of the minutes played from a year ago. Alex Markvaladze, Will Johnston, Rick Asanza, all returning key pieces to what LMU success is going to be. But a ton of talent coming in from the portal: Javon Porter, Jan Vide, Myron Amy, Caleb Stone Carawell. There's a lot of nice pieces that are going to help this LMU team be better than they were a year ago. But they're improvement mode. They have to show that this indeed is going to be a team that can break through. I have at times thought that this is a top 5 LMU team in the WCC, and I still think that is the case, but I still think that there is still a prove it to me mode. And for LMU, if they can put it all together, injury-free, relatively injury-free, obviously no one ends up completely injury-free, but if you can put it together and they start to look the part, like looking the part is a potential top 5, top 4 team in the WCC. But for now, thinking about all the hurdles that they have and also the improvements that the team in front of them have made, LMU is slotted at 6. Number 5, Washington State. This obviously one of the other new teams to the WCC, coming off an NCAA tournament berth, but new head coach, new roster, new league, a lot of new for the Cougars, but a lot of success. David Riley comes in having won back-to-back Big Sky championships. He was the 2-time Coach of the Year there. We've also seen immediate success from Eastern Washington coming over to the WCC. We saw that with Portland, with Shante Leggins in year 1, with the number of guys that he brought over. Key part of that being Cedric Coward and just the type of player that he's going to be. Great catch and shoot player, great post up guy. That's among the other transfers. Ethan Price, Luwan Watts, Dane Eric Strupp, that crew of Eastern guys who came over to Washington State is going to be critical. And I think that success with that team and that continuity that they bring over, even though it's a new team, there is a sense of continuity with a core that is going to be helpful for Washington State early on, and I think that's going to carry over in the WCC play. Now, I do think that their ceiling is maybe about that 4th spot if everything goes their way. This is a team I think that is building a culture. They are trying to figure out who they are and what they're going to be in Pullman and what this is going to look like going forward. Obviously, only a couple short years in the WCC before they return to the Pac-12, but this is still, I think, going to be a solid team that's going to make some waves in the WCC, but I have them slotted right there in the middle at that 5 spot. Number 4 is USF. This USF squad has tournament potential. They have a tournament caliber schedule, and they bring back a lot of the pieces that made them successful a year ago. We also know that this is maybe again, outside of Gonzaga, St. Mary's, maybe the most consistent WCC team in the last decade. 20-plus wins, 7 of the last 8 years. This team returns Marcus Williams. They return Malik Thomas. They return Ryan Beasley. They return Dweedo Newberry. Like, there's a lot of really nice pieces to this squad. Now, the one piece they miss, Jonathan Mobo, and that is a huge part of how successful they were a year ago. And his departure does leave a hole. And there is optimism that part of what he was capable of doing is going to be filled in by Carl Lingard Jr., the 7-foot transfer from UTSA. At the same time, I think it's a lot to ask necessarily of how do you fill the spot of a Jonathan Mobo. There's a lot of hype about now the freshman Tyrone Riley IV, so that'll be exciting to actually see him in action as well. But I do think that the front court of USF is going to be challenged. And I think that this is going to be the one area where they're really going to have to do all the little things right, because the one thing they could do is they could beat all the good teams, but if they're going to beat the better teams in college basketball on their non-conference schedule and also in WCC play, they're going to have to figure out a way for that front court to be a bigger factor, not just their backcourt, which is maybe one of the best in the WCC. And for that's why I'm going to slot them in at 4th. Number 3 is Santa Clara. The Broncos have brought everybody back. They added Carlos Stewart. They brought back Elijah Mahai. This is a team that is primed for an NCAA tournament run. They're a veteran squad. They have the continuity. They have the schedule. They have the talent. They just have to put it all together. They were probably honestly like 2 or 3 big win, or not 2 or maybe one more big win and 2 or 3 bad losses away from really being in the tournament mix a year ago. The Santa Clara team, like, you bring back Adama Ball, you bring back Christoph Tilley, you bring back Johnny O'Neill, you bring back, like, someone I like is Jake Ensminger. Like, this is a squad that is going to be a factor in later and later into the season. This same team, more or less the same team beat Gonzaga last year. They beat Washington State last year. They beat Oregon last year. They are capable of beating those tournament quality teams. They just have to make sure that they don't bumble it against the teams that they shouldn't lose to. And this was a team that was the third place team in back-to-back seasons when Jalen Williams was here, and then also when Brandon Pajemski was here. Santa Clara being at third, I think, is a testament to what they've been able to bring back, what they look like going in. And I think the fact that they have fewer question marks than maybe anybody else on this list, short of maybe the 2 teams ahead of them. Number 2, St. Mary's. St. Mary's does lose Aiden Mahaney. They do lose Joshua Jefferson. 2 key pieces to what they had a year ago. They also lose Alex Dukas to running him out of eligibility, and then he went to the NBA. But this is a St. Mary's squad that is going to be just fine. I think that they brought in pieces and have development pieces that are going to be stepping into those roles. I really like Jordan Ross. I really like Paulos Morauskas. And then also the fact that you do bring back the WCC Player of the Year and the WCC Defensive Player of the Year. I think you cannot overstate or understate the fact that those 2 are key parts of how this ship is going to run. Now, they may not be as good as a year ago with the talent that they have today. They have less continuity than they did at the beginning of last year, which is a part of the conversation. But the St. Mary's team is going to be in the mix again. They have the schedule again. This is a team that should be back in the NCAA tournament. This is a team that still will push Gonzaga. They're still 4-4 against the Zags over their last 8 matchups. So they have been right there with them over the last few years. And the St. Mary's squad might be slotted in at number 2 right now. But if everything goes right, by the time you get to January, February, and March, this is a team that could be in position to win its 3rd straight WCC championship. And then number 1 is Gonzaga. They return, I think it's 75, 72% of the total points, the total minutes. This is a squad that is set and ready to go, especially with the additions they have made with Khalif Battle, with Michael Ajayi, with Emmanuel Innocente. Like, there's a huge part of what this story is. Like, they have the depth that they didn't have a year ago. They have the additional guard play that they did not have a year ago. They have more experience. They have continuity. They have all the things you want. There's a reason they're a top 10 pick. There's a reason why a lot of people have them as a potential Final Four team going into the year. This Gonzaga squad is and should be that first place team. And they're going to get tested maybe even more than they did a year ago in the non-conference. But this is a squad that I think that is going to go deep in the March once again. This is a team that should, on paper, be the WCC champion. And as of right now, that's where I'm going to go with. I'm going to stick with Gonzaga until more or less they prove otherwise, that they are not in this number 1 spot. All right. So quick recap on that. So Gonzaga 1, St. Mary's 2, Santa Clara 3, USF 4, Washington State 5, LMU 6, Oregon State 7, Portland 8, Pacific 9, San Diego 10, and Pepperdine 11. All right. So now I'm going to go through the awards. And I think for a number of these, there is definitely a conversation to be had about who should be in these and who should not be. the sixth man might be the toughest one of them all, only because you never know who's actually going to be coming off the bench. And then if someone's so good coming off the bench, there's at least a decent chance they're going to end up in the starting lineup at some point. So that kind of also starts to weigh into that. So all that said, let's get into it. And I'll start with the newcomer of the year. And there's plenty of options here on the newcomer with the number of transfers that have come in and everything else. But I think it really, like, to me, like, there's three guys that kind of stand out, and two more so than the others, and two more so than the three. Like, I'm going to do a little bit of an acknowledgement for Elijah Mahai, because I think he's going to be a huge part of what Santa Clara does, and so his addition, as well as Carlos Stewart, like it's hard to do I count him as a newcomer? He was really already here once. He came back, but the two Santa Clara guys I think are going to be huge parts of what they do. But I'm not going to necessarily put them and slot them as that newcomer of the year. I want, to me, like, you have to have be like a true newcomer, but also someone who's going to have more impact. The second on my list of that I think is going to be definitely a candidate for this award, but I don't know if he's. But I think the person I have first is going to be just slightly ahead of him. Number two, I have Khalif Battle in this conversation. Obviously, like, we've seen just the tape of him, what he was able to do for Arkansas last year, what he did the other night in the exhibition against USC. You know Khalif Battle is going to be an impact player. You know he's going to be one of the best offensive players in the league. There's no question about that. My thing is just going to be that there's a lot of weapons on that Gonzaga team, and he won't necessarily need to be the guy on a night in, night out basis. And because of that, I think the guy that I have as a newcomer, because he's going to, more of the team is going to lean on him for success, that this is my pick, and that's Cedric Coward. This is going to be Washington State's best player going into the year. This is someone who was an all-league player in the Big Sky a year ago. This is someone who is going to be, I think, the guy to kind of lead that squad. So because of his opportunity, because of his abilities, because of what Washington State's going to need him to do, Cedric Coward, to me, is going to be that newcomer of the year. I'll move up to freshmen. Honestly, the freshman pool is a little light this year when it comes to impact. Now, it's not to say that there aren't a ton of freshmen that are coming in. Portland has a bunch. San Diego has a bunch. Pepperdine has some. There's definitely some freshmen up and down the WCC roster. I just don't think that we're going to we're not seeing a Chet Holmgren level impact like we saw a couple of years ago. I don't think we're going to see a Tyler Harris level impact like we saw last year. Now, that said, I do think there's a couple of guys that are highlighted for me, but the one that's, I think, going to have the greatest opportunity to really do something is going to be up in Portland, and that's Austin Rapp. 6'10", great shooter from the outside, coming over from Australia. Honestly, the way his game sorts, he kind of reminds me a bit of Daniel Kicker. So for those who don't remember, Kicker played for St. Mary's back in the early part. He was the second of the Aussie run for the Gales. But Austin Rapp has a lot of that nice touch from the outside. He can go inside and play back to the basket. Good passer as well. So that's someone I think is going to get a great opportunity to showcase what he's able to do in his first season. And with I think a lighter bunch of freshmen coming in, I think it's going to be much easier to stand out in that group. The only other one, so I'm picking him for freshman of the year. The only other one I'm going to make small mention of is going to be Mikey Lewis at St. Mary's, who I think is going to be kind of like a six-man-esque role for them. And so that's someone I feel that it's going to at least be in the consideration, but Austin Rapp, I think, to me, would be that clear spot for freshman of the year. We'll go over to sixth man. This is the tough one because I feel like there's so many guys who could fall into this. Mention Mikey Lewis, that maybe there's some consideration there. I think Ryan Beasley at USF, there should be absolutely some consideration there based on the season he had a year ago. Jake Ensminger, I think, needs to be part of that conversation as well for what he's going to bring to Santa Clara, and I think he does a lot of little things right. But maybe the flashy numbers aren't going to be off the charts for him. And then I have a trio of Gonzaga players that I think are going to be in the mix. Braden Huff, I think, is one of those. With the front court of Gonzaga kind of still being a little on the thin side, he's going to be a huge factor in what they're able to accomplish. We were able to see his offensive game, what he's able to do on that end of the floor. We saw him get better defensively as the season went on in his freshman year. So Braden Huff, I think, is a possibility in that. And really, I think who is going to be the sixth man is, and this is where it depends, because the other night we saw Khalif Battle make the start for Gonzaga, and Nolan Hickman came off the bench. Now, I don't necessarily think that means that one will start and one won't. It could have just been for the exhibition, and Nolan Hickman could end up being the starter. So I think I'll make the pick in this way. Whichever one of those two is not the starter will end up being the sixth man of the year. Because I think Nolan Hickman, if he's the one coming off the bench, is going to make a huge impact. If Khalif Battle comes off the bench, he's going to make a huge impact. Whichever one of those two, I think, is going to be Gonzaga's best bench player. And whichever it is, I think, is an easy pick to be sixth man of the year for the WCC. Defensive player of the year. This honestly might have been one of the easier picks going into this season. Because looking down the strengths of a lot of the WCC teams, it's hard to find the team who has defense first in their DNA. It's hard to even see the individuals who have that in their DNA. Anton Watson is gone. Jonathan Mobo is gone. I don't think you have a, quote, elite perimeter defender anywhere in the WCC. What you do have is the reigning defensive player of the year, who also is one of the best defensive centers in college basketball, and that's Mitchell Saxon. I don't think that we're not going to see, obviously, a drop-off here. We know what he can do on the rebounding front. We know how he can defend the paint. We know how good he is against defenders. We've seen him throughout the course of the years. Like, this has been one of the best defensive players in the WCC his entire career. And him being the reigning defensive player of the year is part of this, but also just the fact that he's going to be more experienced. He's going to come in with a little bit more insurance behind him. So I think he's going to be able to play maybe not necessarily more carefree, but like he's going to have some backup. I think like Harry Wessel should be more healthy going into the year. I think we're also going to see quite like at least a bit of Andrew McKeever, who redshirted last year at that center spot. So that's another backup that he's going to have. So Mitchell Saxon, I think for DPOY was the easy slot in for the preseason pick there. Player of the year. There's a number of guys you could go with. And thinking about the way that that teams have to be successful and in the way in which they are going to be successful, I landed on one name, and I landed on name I think I said a year ago for the WCC Player of the Year, and that's Ryan Nembhard. This is a guy who can get you the buckets when you need him to. He's a great floor general. He's good. He's a good defender. This is someone who is going to lead this Gonzaga squad. I think is now more experienced, is more comfortable with the system, way more comfortable with the system. He is going to be, I think, like Gonzaga's best player night in, night out. I do think that there's sometimes a little bit more variance with a Graham Ike. There's a little bit more variance with, say, an Augustus Marciulionis. But Ryan Nembhard is about as consistent as it gets in the WCC. He is one of the better players in the WCC. And he is going to have, I think, a great impact on what Gonzaga is able to do. And, of course, I think this is going to be a first-place team. And so I'm going best player on the best team as well. So Ryan Nembhard would be my pick for player of the year. And then, okay, of course, one more. I did not get to coach of the year. That one kind of slipped my mind. I think there's two scenarios. So one if Santa Clara makes a run, if Santa Clara becomes the team I think we all think they can be, then Coach of the Year, I think, ends up being Herb Sendek. Because if they can get back to the NCAA tournament, or at least obviously they'll have made the pick before they announce that. But if they're in position to make the tournament by the time the regular season ends, I think Herb Sendek gets that call. Otherwise, I think we're going back to the coach who has been one of the better coaches in all of college basketball for the last 25 years. The team who I think is obviously the coach of the team who I'm picking first in the league this year, Mark Few. I think that this one going into this season seems clearer than in most. Again, there are circumstances, whatnot, as I mentioned, if Santa Clara goes on a run, whatever else. But going into this season, I think Coach of the Year, with the expectations that Gonzaga has, with the type of season I think they're going to have, that Gonzaga will separate itself from a lot of other teams, definitely in the WCC, and that Mark Few is going to reclaim the WCC Coach of the Year award. All right, well, that'll do it for this one. Again, Coach of the Year, Mark Few; Player of the Year, Ryan Nembhard; DPOY, Mitchell Saxon. I'm going with the either Nolan Hickman or Khalif battle for Sixth Man of the Year. Freshman of the Year, Austin Rapp; newcomer, Cedric Coward. And not all of them. That is all of them. So yeah, and then season picks, one more time: Gonzaga 1, St. Mary's 2, Santa Clara 3, USF 4, Washington State 5, LMU 6, Oregon State 7, Portland 8, Pacific 9, San Diego 10, Pepperdine 11. Only a few more days until the start of the season. I'm excited. I know you're excited. So one more time, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and then also follow along on social media at Post by Zach, and also at unofficial WCC Pod. That'll do it. Thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in, and I will catch you later.